Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 9, Monday Night Football edition. Bucs travel to Arrowhead to take on the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. More on that game a little bit later in the program, as we'll recap everything we saw for the week that was and highlight some of the bigger storylines, some breaking after a lot of the country went to bed last night. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, it was just a matter of time. We knew it was coming. Thank you to the New York Jets.
Yeah, it's just one.
We start stacking.
Need more to go.
Another rocking chair winner in the newsletter. Alvin Kamara pretty much doubled his over-under on rushing attempts.
Indeed. All right, let's get to some good, bad, and ugly.
You want to start with Sunday Night Football, and you want to give the Minnesota Vikings their proper recognition for the defensive effort against Joe Flacco and the Indianapolis Colts, or do you want to give the Raiders front office credit for deciding, you know what, we've seen enough of the Luke Getsy experience that we're going to basically can our entire offensive staff to get things headed in the right direction, at least theoretically?
Well, let's start with Sunday Night Football. I know one of those teams is in the ugly section, so we can kind of consolidate it there. I think Sunday Night Football was both good and bad. I'm not sure what the Colts' game plan was. Just way too much running on first down. 13 first down runs in total. Mentioned ahead of the game when we broke it down that Taylor's rush efficiency decreases in games with Joe Flacco. There just isn't that zone read element there that you have to prepare for Anthony Richardson's legs, and it allows Taylor to have a little bit more room. 3 successful runs from Taylor all night. If you remove the outlier 13-yard run, the other 12 went for 35 yards. Joe Flacco had a 25% passing success rate. As a whole, this was the worst EPA per play effort out of the Colts offense all season. Now, game plan was bad. I would give Brian Flores and the Vikings defense a lot of credit as well. I think our conversation on this game probably was the most sophisticated, high level that you probably heard all week, and potentially one of our better breakdowns of the season. I don't believe the Vikings have the league's best defense, but it's amazing how many people were trying to sell the unit because the Lions gave them trouble again, and they were in a horrific spot on a short week traveling to a different time zone to face the best version of the Rams offense all season, a version that, if you had extrapolated it out, when those 4 gentlemen played for 2 seasons, it was the number 1 EPA offense. And now you have a smart staff that had a mini bye and was back home in the best environment, and I thought it showed. So wasn't quite sure what Shane Steichen was doing, and usually we like a lot of his game plans and scripts. That was not the case this go-around, and then Brian Flores got back on track at home. And Joe Flacco is certainly an upgrade if you're going to use him properly. Still not a great quarterback, still below average quarterback, and when he's not used properly in a very difficult environment, that's basically what you get. Not good under pressure last night.
No, he wasn't good under pressure, and that was one of the areas that you figured he could struggle with. But when you're constantly putting him behind the down and distance, right, it's never going to play into his strengths, even with some of the weapons that he has.
And it's going to play into Flores' strengths, right? Because that's when he likes to dial up the blitz, 2nd and long, right, 3rd and obvious. And that's kind of what we saw on display.
Pretty much gives him all his cheat codes. By the way, a little bit of breaking news here this morning as we record. One NFL team will be in need of a new head coach starting this weekend, a game that we were going to highlight in the look ahead lines. The Saints officially parting ways with Dennis Allen this Monday morning.
Ooh, okay. So, there you go. Long overdue.
Yeah, you figured that was going to be the case. Didn't exactly have the best hand dealt to him from an injury luck perspective, but I guess when you beat the Carolina Panthers by 100 points week 1 and you've now lost 7 straight, losing outright as a 7-point favorite, defying the odds, that was kind of the breaking point for the Saints. So Dennis Allen officially...
And your defense is a disaster.
It's an unmitigated disaster. Relieved of his duties as boss of the New Orleans Saints. Other good that we saw, Payne, and I think we both operated of the mindset that this Denver defense wasn't as good as what we had seen from a counting stats perspective when they had to finally step up in class, and they were exposed to a certain extent by the Baltimore Ravens offense that have made a lot of defenses look pretty pedestrian so far this season. The Ravens roll up 41 points, nearly 400 yards, 7.3 yards per play on just 54 plays offensively. Lamar finishes the game 16 of 19 with a perfect passer rating. Derrick Henry yet another game where he goes for 100+ and continues to rack up touchdowns. We give the Baltimore Ravens credit. They've run for 100 yards in 42 consecutive games now, one shy of the NFL record that the Ravens share with Pittsburgh. Baltimore also has compiled at least 1 sack in 47 straight. A Ravens team that will break down in great detail when we see them on Thursday night for a revenge game, at least from Cincinnati's standpoint, against the Ravens on a short week.
If the Ravens can stay healthy and get anything out of their defense, Lamar has a real chance to silence a couple of the remaining critics and get a ring. The offensive line has improved quietly. That Lamar, Derrick Henry zone read game is becoming quite difficult to defend, and now you have the addition of Deontay Johnson. And so the offense can be multifaceted, right? If an opponent decides to load the box, you can go 3 wide with Zay Flowers and Deontay and Bateman, or you can go heavy with Andrews and Likely. And, you know, as it stands right now, this Ravens offense metrically is better than any of the recently great offenses, better than the 49ers offense last year, better than the 2022 Chiefs offense, better than Brady's Buccaneers Super Bowl offense, and by really, really comfortable margins, Todd. This is the number 1 offense in the league. It's number 1 offense that we've seen in recent times.
When you mention all the metrics and how good they've been there, I mean, I trust your eye as much as anybody. Does it look like the offense is operating at a elite level, or do you have some concerns that you've seen that you don't feel are fleshed out in some of the numbers?
It's a good question. I mean, would you like the ability on, you know, third and obvious to launch a ball like, you know, Mahomes had with Tyreek, and that's potentially not there. But, man, they're just so good down to down. They stay ahead of the chains, and, you know, when you're living in comfortable situations, it's so difficult to defend, right? It's like, okay, you know, you're in 3rd and short, and it's like, how do you stop that with this team? You want to run the ball with Lamar, you can do it. You want to hand it off to Henry, he's probably going to push the pile forward. You want to drop back and pass, and you think you've got everything defended. Lamar finds a gap and uses his legs. You want to keep a spy on him. All of a sudden, there's something wide open over the middle of the field. It's a very synergistic offense right now that just can hitch him multiple ways. It's just very difficult to defend. And then you got Todd Monken, who we really like and caters game plans weekly to opponent. They can do everything right now.
Yeah, you mentioned the trade for Deontay Johnson, and also they have a home run hitter waiting in the wings. We'll see how healthy Keaton Mitchell is when he gets out there as well, to give them the change of pace back that we saw his big play potential in a limited sample size last year. And you talk about a true thunder and lightning combination. If he's 100%, makes it awfully scary with him and Derrick Henry in the backfield.
Yeah, but it's Justice Hill has been very good catching balls out of the backfield as well. Uber efficient there. I mean, I know he's a guy that a lot of prop folks have circled a lot of weeks catching balls out of the backfield with his receiving numbers in specific situations, because he has been very, very good in that role. So, but yes, to your point, you sprinkle in a healthy Keaton Mitchell, and this becomes a very, very dynamic offense, even more so on the ground.
We usually rule with an iron fist around here, so I do want to give credit to a quarterback has made the bad or ugly list all that often, and he wasn't great yesterday, but he did lead a win, and that's Bryce Young for the first time in his NFL career. He gets the lineup in the victory formation, completed 16 of 26 passes, 171 yards, and I guess now it's even more of a signature performance when you cost another man his job by going out there to do that. Led a game-winning drive late for the Panthers, and the players seem to speak up in support of Bryce Young. What was most interesting in the wake of that win, Dave Canales still didn't commit to him being the starting quarterback if Andy Dalton returns healthy. So yes, the numbers, the metrics don't jump off the page at you by any stretch, but when we skewer a guy on a regular basis in Bryce Young and he gets the win and gets the chance to take the knee, I'll give him his credit for leading Carolina to an outright upset as a 7-point dog.
Yeah, I can't hate on that. It was good to see him have a little confidence. Now, if the barometer for Bryce Young's success is Bryce Young's prior performances, then it's tough, but I think we're kind of gauging this a little bit and grading it on a curve, and I thought he played well. Even the metrics weren't terrible, right? Finished QB 13 in EPA per play and 10th with a completion rate almost 4% over expectation. He had the game-winning drive. It's just, I think, it's good for a young kid to see the ball go through the hoop, so to speak, and gain some confidence. Now, you could say, hey, the Saints defense were down multiple starters in the secondary. Sure. He was also down multiple pass-catching options. So, I give him some kudos here. It wasn't like the most ridiculous effort. The metrics probably wouldn't lead other quarterbacks to be placed in the good section most weeks, but little positivity here for Bryce Young. Let's see what comes of it.
I have one other that I wanted to get to, but also wanted to hear some of the things that stood out to you in a positive manner that we've seen transpire thus far.
Well, I think we just go to a game we discussed, and maybe a little frustrating for us as we didn't fully get there on the under. Couldn't really understand how that total was not ticking down, but probably have to look to the Lions again, who just...
Juggernaut.
Dan Campbell, oh my God, just fucking bet him and go take a nap and wake up every morning with some dollars in the account. It seems to be that easy, and I'm sure there's a couple folks out there who are doing it. But across the board, that was supposed to be a situation in a spot where maybe we didn't see their best, right? Outdoors, grass, weather, Goff. They didn't ask Goff to do a ton. But he, again, was wildly efficient. The last 3 games, Goff's 52 for 62, and that doesn't include the 18 for 18 against Seattle on a Monday night. So Goff's been wildly efficient. This was just far and away his worst environment of the season, but Dan Campbell made a good point after the game that they love the muck. Effectively, right? And he's got an O-line that's built for it. You got 2 good backs that complement each other. First 3 quarters, the Lions had a 41% rushing success rate, plus 0.09 EPA per rush. Nothing elite, but solid in that situation when it seems like, the Packers know they want to run the ball. I was a little surprised LaFleur gave up on the run game and put it in Jordan Love's hands virtually the entire way, because they were having some decent success and efficiency running the ball, and I thought they maybe should have stuck with it a little bit. But kudos to the Lions. Another win, and it looks like Jamison Williams is on his way back, so you get another weapon.
You also do wonder in that game how much differently things are if Jordan Love doesn't throw an inexplicable interception. Claim he didn't see the defender again, and chasing uphill in those kind of elements was never going to be the recipe for success. So for those folks who just look at the box score and see Green Bay winning a lot of the counting stats, it did not come anywhere close to telling the true story, as Green Bay did a lot of their damage when the outcome had already been decided, with the Lions building a 24-6 lead. And keep in mind, we talk about exceeding expectations on this show on a regular basis, and it was a Lions team that took money against. I mean, that number got as high as 4 earlier in the week when we broke it down on look-ahead numbers, when we were trying to figure out who the starting quarterback was going to be. Closes 2.5 with professionals willing to grab the 3 with the home underdog, and the Lions clearly showed that they were the better football team from start to finish. From the good to the bad, Payne, and I guess with the Jameis Winston experience, when we highlight the good, you get a little bit of the bad, but he wasn't the only one at fault. You made the joke that Denzel Ward may have been better served to sit this one out, given what we saw defensively. And he was pretty harsh in his own assessment of his performance. 2 busted coverages. The Chargers built a comfortable early lead and were never pushed in the second half with this Browns offense that just couldn't get on track after putting a crooked number last week against the Ravens.
It's one of those games where, as the week started to go on a little bit, you were hearing some Chargers talk, but it never got over the goal line, so to speak. I'm sure there were a few guys that ended up going, but the big group that had it circled and one specific bettor who was discussing it never really got to the window. But it just wasn't a focused group for the Browns, right? It wasn't the same vibe, the same energy, the same effort we had saw a week ago against the Ravens, and the Browns really couldn't get their run game going. So the Chargers were able to sit back in their too-high shell with extra defenders and confuse Jameis. Chargers did a really good job with Derwin James and a couple other guys closing off the middle of the field and forced Jameis to throw into traffic. And at least early on, Jameis was a little trigger shy in the game. He had some open guys, just wouldn't let it rip. And then you mentioned defensively, you think it's a big boost getting lead corner Denzel Ward back. That was the reason for the game day steam under that we saw, 42.5 down to 41 some places. It was a little surprising that Denzel Ward returned. And it ends up staying under all numbers. But he is partly responsible, to your point there, and he admitted as much after the game with the coverage busts. I mean, 3rd and 21 at the Cleveland 28, that is you're feeling good. We're going to be able to hold the 3 here. Coverage bust, touchdown. 3rd and 7 situation a few drives later, midway through the second quarter, 66-yard explosive touchdown on a coverage bust. And you're starting to look at the play-by-play data in that first half. It's like, Jesus, Justin Herbert's under duress basically every time he's not spotting a coverage bust. Chargers cannot run the football. And so you're thinking, hey, maybe we can kind of work our way back into this game. If you're familiar with the Jameis Winston experience, we've seen some certainly late-game surges. And so I thought there was a little bit of a regrouping at halftime. Browns offense comes out with a very nice opening drive, and then Tillman drops a walk-in touchdown on a slant. 1 play later, tipped interception in the end zone. That was kind of the nail in the coffin for the Browns.
Speaking of nails in the coffin, the Chicago Bears, overall from start to finish, some teams use unfortunate sequences of events as a rallying cry, given what we saw unfold in the nation's capital with the Commanders in that late Hail Mary, but the Bears went the exact opposite direction. Tyreek Stevenson walks out of practice after he finds out he's not going to be starting, more or less set the tone for the entire week. Group didn't show a ton of fight. You didn't have Jaquan Brisker still out with a concussion, Kyler Gordon dealing with a hamstring injury, and Montez Sweat. Reports shared that he was cut by a cleat against the Commanders, was a DNP as well. But if you were looking for icing on the cake for Chicago, the Bears allow the Arizona Cardinals to run for 200-plus yards, including the back-breaking 53-yard run from DeMarcado before the half. Why is that all relevant? Well, Elias Sports Bureau Payne said that is the longest run to close a first half with under 20 seconds to go since the merger in 1970. Complete bust in defensive coverage assignments, and it was more or less the straw that broke the camel's back because Arizona didn't do a whole heck of a lot to create separation. Just looked like that Bears team is beaten and battered, and you wonder where the team goes from here.
Yeah, we had heard about the Montez Sweat injury, but then on Thursday got in a light practice. So we were kind of biding our time there. Friday recorded the DNP, and we're like, okay, this is looking potentially a little bit better. And then Friday, Kyler Gordon gets in the DNP. But once Montez Sweat and Kyler Gordon were officially ruled out, you and I attacked this game a little bit. There were guys on that Bears defense who were publicly calling out the staff throughout the week. The vibes just felt off, as you mentioned, players walking off the practice field during the week, and it kind of spilled over into a game situation on the road in a different time zone. First 3 quarters, the Bears defense allowed plus 0.49 EPA per rush, effectively half a point the Bears allowed every time Arizona ran the ball the first 3 quarters, 58% rushing success rate allowed. And so when you get bullied in the trench, not that it's the end-all be-all in terms of like what's transpiring, right? There's some scheme stuff, right? There's some matchup stuff. But when you're just getting constantly beat in the trench, it does maybe lend itself to some lacking effort, which seemed somewhat obvious there from a couple gentlemen up front.
All three
I will say this:
running backs log an explosive run of 15-plus yards. You don't see that all the time in the National Football League.
I missed the DeMarcado run. Right after the first down and second down looked like it was a wash, I just assumed a draw was coming. So I hopped off the couch and went to the kitchen to grab a snack, and all of a sudden I hear the announcer yelling, and just DeMarcado's in the end zone at that point. I was like, boy, it's nice to have one of those rubbish-type plays to go for us.
Nice to get the swing touchdown before the end of the half. But, I was like you. I went to get a drink, came back upstairs and go, how is this game now 21-9? And then you see the highlights, and it would have been a touchdown in flag football for how many Bears got their fingertips on DeMarcado there with the play. Seattle Seahawks, they come up a bit short in overtime, 26-20 to the Los Angeles Rams. I don't have any historical precedent for it, Payne, but I imagine it doesn't happen often that a team goes into the red zone on their final 3 drives and comes away -7 like Seattle did. Applauded the aggressive nature from Ryan Grubb and company to try and win the game when they had the ball offensively, but I'm not sure how you begin to explain the play calling sequence there in overtime inside the red zone on 3rd and short, 4th and short, and what Seattle let slip through their fingers against a division rival.
Yeah, the football gods are certainly making us work for this win total. There's no doubt about that, dropping the game to the Giants and now dropping this game in a wild fashion. And to your point, I don't think I've seen a situation where an offense has gone into the red zone 3 times, come away with 0 themselves, and gifted 7 to the other team. I mean, it's inconceivable. You're thinking in a worst-case situation, maybe you turn it over once down there, settle for 2 field goals, you come away with a +6, and somehow you're a -7 in those 3 sequences. It's mind-numbing. Apparently
Hurricanes and Seminoles can play nicely together on that Rams defense, given what we saw from Cam Kitchens and the way that Florida State tandem tried to disrupt that game from start to finish.
The O-line for Seattle is abysmal right now, and Geno has ended up facing the most quick pressure of any quarterback this season, and by a large margin. So there's a lot of anticipation throws because that's just what's needed. It's tough to push the ball downfield because the pressure is just on Geno so early, and then you don't have your separator in DK for the game, which we kind of leaned that way. It's also tough to line up and tell a defense what you're doing and be able to execute in short yardage, as we saw. And so, 1st and goal at the Rams 6 to start the 4th quarter, you think you're gaining momentum, and it's, the 103-yard pick 6. I love the decision, like you, to go for it on 4th down and overtime. Don't love the play call. Don't love the prior 3 play calls. Right? I mean, it's 1st and 10 at the Rams 25. 4 straight runs. I just,
get the ball to
maybe
JSN.
Get Smith and Jigba
Get
the ball. Looks like he's
him.
got a decent matchup advantage. I mean, you look at that guy's numbers. I think he had another 70 yards called back because of holding penalties on the offensive line.
How dare you cast aspersions at Michael Jarrell and his attempts to block along that Seahawks offensive line.
So, I mean, I love Kenneth Walker in terms of his burst and the ability to turn a 7-yard run into a home run, but you need 1 yard. And Walker tries to hit home runs so much that it comes with a lot of zeros and negatives, and you don't need a home run in that situation. You just need a 1st down. So, to me, first 3 quarters, minus 0.37 EPA per rush for the Seahawks, 35% success rate. It's not like there had been lots of rushing efficiency for Grubb to say, hey, let's dial up 4 straight runs in the biggest moment of this game.
Yeah, not ideal. Not ideal in the least. The Seahawks will rue one that got away against the Rams team that's starting to pick things up momentum-wise, and they did so in the second half of that game without Puka Nacua, who was ejected from the contest for throwing a punch, because when you have a chance to punch another player in the helmet, you have to take advantage in the NFL, although it did seem a little bit ticky-tack for me. Any other bad before we get into the ugly and we highlight the Raiders?
No. I was not a fan of the Brian Branch ejection either.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what exactly had unfolded in real time. I mean, it was a vicious hit. We see it all the time. I figure since he's not a repeat offender, you get the 15-yard penalty and you're done. I didn't think it was going to warrant an ejection. I figured he had said something to the official until I went back, read the play-by-play, and saw some of the comments on social media.
Yep.
So
And then there was oh my God. Yeah, I'm just watching the Puka thing again. That was as light as possibly could be. That's terrible.
I don't think that was it's not suspension, ejection worthy.
Yeah, completely agree there. That's terrible.
Challenge there. Ugly.
As someone who was rooting for the Seahawks, that was terrible.
Look, we can come in and be as unbiased as possible with a lot of this stuff, unlike some folks out there that get blinded by their bets and can only see it through one particular lens, regardless of who they have an investment on in any particular contest.
I did like in that game they picked up the
flag late that looked like the Rams were going to be given an automatic first down with a chance to win at the end of regulation.
I mean, that was a perfect play from the safety. And I saw the flag come. I'm like, you got to be kidding
Julian
me.
Love comes across the field,
safety,
lays the shoulder in there. He laid the boom, but there was nothing dirty or malicious about that. So I will give the officials credit for that, for not trying to make sure their fingerprints are all over the end of the game situation. Raiders in the ugly late last night. They fire offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, according to Tom Pelissero, but they also part ways with their quarterback coach, Rick Scangarello, and offensive line coach James Craig. The Raiders have started Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and we got a Desmond Ridder sighting. Something tells me it's not just the offensive staff that's the problem here. Antonio Pierce dodges the firing squad again, but this was a Raiders team who I didn't quite understand how people were talking about them potentially taking the next step because it was an all-in effort. We've seen the fiasco with Devontae Adams, now a member of the Jets, and there's a legitimate chance that the Raiders finish with the worst record in the NFL, and it's why I've said, Payne, you want to become an attraction, bring in Shedeur Sanders, make Deion Sanders the head coach. You may not win a ton of games initially, but it at least creates some buzz out here in the desert.
You reading off the firings of those three offensive minds had me chuckle because, I mean...
A true who's who.
Yeah. I mean, Luke Getsy wasn't good in Chicago, but he was willing to be a yes man to Antonio Pierce and the style of team that Pierce wanted, so he got the job. Gardner Minshew isn't a starter in this league. Fine backup in spot duty when needed if he's in the right system. Desmond Ridder isn't an NFL quarterback. Much to our chagrin, this is what we said was going to transpire last season, and there was just an anomaly, 1 in a fucking million turn of events that had one of the best win totals potentially that we've ever bet somehow lose. And, you know, we're now seeing what we said they were. All the rah-rah stuff works initially, but when you've kind of proven that you don't have a clue, all the players are kind of out. And we're seeing not just the offense be a disaster, but the effort that came with the defense last season late in the year. And they were trending towards a top 5 defense. And I understand the schedule was down, but you could just see the energy and effort. The Raiders entered this week 23rd in schedule-adjusted defense. That's only going to tick down after giving up a 61% success rate to a Bengals offense. Down T. Higgins, their starting left tackle, and Brown, Jermaine Burton and Moss as well. 61% is the top mark for an offense this week before tonight. And Raiders couldn't stop the run either. Mark Davis is going to have to hit reset on this again this offseason. Hopefully Brady and a few other guys can lead him in a better direction. I would think Mark Davis is going to be a little bit more open to some suggestion from some folks in the analytical space that have tried helping him the last 2 hirings and kind of went in one ear and out the other. So I think they'll be able to potentially bring in the right guy, Deion Sanders.
I'm kidding about the Deion Sanders situation.
Quarterback though could be fine.
The Philadelphia Eagles, Payne, yes, they get the win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but that game was a hell of a lot more difficult for Philly and company than it needed to be. They build a 22-0 lead. You give up an innocuous touchdown. You figure, no big deal. Then they give up a scoop and score, and the Jaguars had the football deep in Eagles territory with a chance to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Nick Sirianni, I don't know what the hell is going on. I mean, in terms of some of these coaching decisions and everything else, the offense needs to run through Saquon Barkley, it is, and Kellen Moore has at least identified that. You highlighted a few weeks ago that this had to be more the Jalen Hurts offense than the way Kellen Moore wanted to operate, but they're making things that much more difficult than they need to be, and I begin to wonder what this ceiling can be for Philadelphia, a team that checks a lot of boxes for being a legitimate Super Bowl contender, at least on the surface.
They're winning in spite of Nick Sirianni. And I got to choose my words carefully a little bit here because I don't want to pile on the situation out of respect for the folks that hired Sirianni. But wasn't a fan of that hire. I think we've kind of voiced that a little bit as pleasantly as we could have over the last couple of seasons. But I guess the question that probably acts as the best answer, what does Nick Sirianni do to help improve this team? Right? He's not running the offense. He's not running the defense, although he tries to call plays here and there. He's like, hey, let me step in here. I got a good one. As he's conjured up an idea on the sideline that he wants to
It's like the absentee fantasy manager. Doesn't want to do all the prep, but decides he wants to duck in the fourth round and tell you he's got to draft a Jet.
Ooh, shots fired there. That team has not gone overly well, I will say. And somehow the same information managed to draft like the best team known to mankind. Without his fingerprints on it. Getting back in line here, Nick Sirianni isn't running the offense. He's not running the defense. He's not a head coach calling plays where you could be like, okay, the offense looks great and he's calling plays. He's mostly responsible for that. We'll just fix the other side somehow, bring in someone new. And if we were having this conversation through this exact time frame of last season, right, 8-9 weeks in, Sirianni found himself metrically in the top half of NFL coach value based on his decision-making. That's not the case this season. And some of the actual decisions might make some sense. Some of the injection into the play calling in those short yardage situations are just overthinking it. The locker room doesn't seem to love him either. We've talked about, Jalen Hurts and the offense looking a little bit clunky. Whose offense is it? The crazy part to this point, I mean, they're getting by, right? And certainly there's some areas of struggle, but it's we were a little bit invested in Jalen Hurts as MVP, at a flyer number, 18. He's 12-1 in the market right now. So it's as bad as this has been, they're still showing some signs of life in some areas. Now, let's see the A.J. Brown situation. It becomes a little bit more difficult when your offense is clunky and you don't have the talent to get you out of the clunkiness. That can be a little bit of a factor where injuries might be a little bit more problematic for an offense like this who is reliant upon its talent. And you got some issues going along the offensive line as well, injury-wise. So I don't know how you rectify this because everything's still in front of you. And you make some dramatic move, it could sink the ship because what's the better path? I would think, again, I probably should get a better vibe of the locker room and I can find out a little bit more, but you certainly do have a coordinator with head coaching experience. And if that head coach is willing to just be like, hey, I'm going to do the defense, Kellen, you figure out the offense, and let's remove this guy who's causing a little bit of contention, that's probably the right path. I just don't know if it's the path that Vic Fangio would take, being at his age and potentially, a little crotchety.
We all get
so
get
that's
to that point.
That's kind
we
of
all
where
get to that point in our lives.
That's the only, you're not bringing in someone new off the street, right? You'd have to, if you canned them, you'd be promoting right within. So that would maybe be the difficult component to removing Sirianni from the equation.
For sure.
That's kind of all I have there. Just kind of going off the top of my head.
No, all good. Anything else that you wanted to highlight before we pivot from the good, bad, and the ugly and do a little rapid-fire look-ahead numbers?
No, I think we're good. I didn't realize we're about the 35-minute
Sometimes we ramble. Sometimes we got a ton of information we have to try and discuss from start to finish. So you can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. You can follow me there as well at Todd Fuhrman. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod, and sign up for the Bet the Board podcast newsletter delivered right to you each and every Friday throughout the course of football season. Rapid fire through some of the look-ahead numbers here, Payne. We have the Buffalo Bills, who continue to create separation in the AFC East, and I think they're pretty close to mathematically eliminating the rest of the field with another couple of wins. They were a 3-point favorite on the road against the Indianapolis Colts. That number has now ballooned out to 4.5. The Bills don't exceed odds makers' expectations with a narrow victory and a 61-yard Tyler Bass field goal, but the Indianapolis Colts underwhelmed, and underwhelmed isn't strong enough given everything that you outlined there at the top.
I don't know if this will be a game we talk about Thursday. So maybe give a little more information there. Buffalo's passing attack without Amari Cooper was pretty abysmal yesterday. If you look at Josh Allen's air yards per attempt, he was checked down Charlie again. And so when you're laying 4.5 on the road and there isn't really an ability to push the ball down the field, it gets a little difficult. I also don't know. I mean, is this the Flacco experience the rest of the way, no matter what?
The way that Shane Steichen made it sound that it wasn't just going to be a 1-week stopgap.
Yeah. I know Colts fans are clamoring to the idea of, if we're going to experiment offensively, might as well do it with the young kid with upside, not the 40-year-old. But I would expect a little bit different of an offense for Shane Steichen. I would expect a little bit more aggressiveness through the air on early downs, although Buffalo does provide some pressure. Josh Allen, we'll have to look into that a little bit. Struggled mightily a season ago against cover 3, which it's kind of a zone defense, and that's what the Colts live in. And he's been a little bit better against that this season. The Colts front now healthy, doing a decent job stopping the run. So it's an interesting game. But the reason for the movement, obviously, is Buffalo wins again. Joe Flacco looks abysmal. Colts do not meet expectation, and that's really the reason for this. But it wouldn't completely stun me here. We've had some pretty sharp buys on the Colts in recent weeks, and I don't know how much higher you can trend up from 4.5.
Very good point. I don't think this number is headed to 6. Let's put it that way. Falcons were right around a pick'em for their road trip against a division rival at the Saints. Falcons now reopened 3, got to 3.5 on Monday morning. As I look at the screen, a smattering of soft 3.5s and 3 -20s amid some of the coaching news as well.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta is finding ways to win games. They seem relatively well coached. If you're not going to be able to stop the run or get pressure, Atlanta's offense is going to fare pretty well. Comfy confines of a dome. Usually we do get the coach firing.
Dead cat bounce.
Yeah, dead cat bounce. That's the perfect description. So we'll see if New Orleans has a little bit of energy and life. The driving force, though, to this is some of the injuries, right? I mean, Olave, I believe that is his 3rd concussion.
They were saying, I think,
season,
on the broadcast, it's his 5th since 2021 or 2020.
Yeah, he had 2020. Yeah, he had 2 in college, and he's had 3 within, I want to say, like the last 5.
Yeah, we
weeks.
ain't seeing him for another couple weeks.
Okay. So, and that offense without him, and we know Shaheed's down, there's really not a lot of pop. And now, Derek Carr certainly looks like a different quarterback when he's not pressured, and Atlanta can't spell pressure. So
don't tell
it'll
that
be
to the
interesting
Dallas
to
Cowboys,
see.
by the way, Atlanta with 3 sacks, and they only had 6 coming into the game.
Inherently, this game is all about price, where you're playing the game of, did we get to a point here where it's too egregious?
Speaking of egregious, Dallas Cowboys were 3-point home underdogs against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now we're seeing Philadelphia a 6.5-point road favorite in this spot. A series that has normally been dominated by the home team, but speculation is rampant, and rightfully so, that the Cowboys could be going into battle on Sunday with the Cooper Rush experience. Keep in mind, though, A.J. Brown did leave the game as well for Philadelphia against Jacksonville.
Yeah.
You're going to want to monitor his status, but it explains why the total is down substantially from what we expected. As far as the side, 6.5, the prevailing number.
Yeah, the total's been buried under since the moment it reposted. And it's Dak with the hamstring injury, A.J. Brown with the knee injury, a couple offensive line injuries there, I believe. The backup tackle there for the Eagles went down in game, and so they were on a third string tackle as well. So there's some injuries. We did see Micah Parsons do some things defensively late in the week off to the side. Does he return for a division game? Deron Bryant, I mean, Jesus criminy. Maybe he's up. So all of the factors here would be leaning towards an under. Now, at 43.5, you would certainly be getting the worst number possible. So I would not potentially advise that, even though there's a chance that this could certainly stay under 43.5. I just, once you miss the number by multiple points through multiple keys, it's not really.
Where did this fully reopen from a total standpoint? I mean, I know it was 48.5 before. The reopen was, 44.5?
Yeah, if you had like an uber quick trigger, there was some higher stuff out there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't see.
But yes, the official widely available reopen, there was some 45 and some 44.5.
Gobbled.
Now we're below the key now at 43.5.
You lose.
It's just and it doesn't sound like it's 100% certain that A.J. Brown is out either. Depending on, I mean, he's a specimen. So depending on the severity of the knee injury, which I believe he's getting an MRI right now, I believe in this window. So if it's minor, receivers have played through this. He's one of the tougher guys. He's built a little bit differently, but if it's on the severe end of the spectrum, could be as much as 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll see what ultimately gets unveiled after the MRI.
Final game as far as look-ahead adjustments, one that we will cover in great detail and arguably one of the marquee matchups for NFL Week 10. The Detroit Lions go on the road for the second consecutive week. They were a 2.5-point favorite on a look-ahead number against the Houston Texans. That number got as high as 4, given Detroit's performance against Green Bay and Houston's struggles against the Jets. We're now kind of in that 3.5 range, painted across the board for what should be a fun game between a team hell-bent on winning the NFC and the Detroit Lions and the Houston Texans team that a lot of people were bullish on coming into the season that's underwhelmed for the majority of the campaign, at least from a point spread perspective.
There's even some fours out there right now. I mean, Detroit just keeps covering back inside of a dome, fast turf. I don't think you can get much higher, especially with Nico Collins, who's going to trend towards playing. So when that officially hits the screen, I don't envision the fours lasting. It's possible Houston gets a couple defenders back healthy. That would be a key to this.
Extra time to prepare as well.
Yep, you got the mini bye. So, Houston's offense has been struggling mightily. I think the question becomes, at least what we have seen to this point. It's a Sunday night game. We'll break this down a little bit, but maybe a little teaser, right? Like Houston obviously is. I mentioned Geno Smith facing quick pressure. C.J. Stroud, number 2 in that category, facing quick pressure. Detroit's defensive line. I believe they're in the midst of completing a trade, is my understanding there, with Zadarius Smith from the Browns. So maybe that gets executed here within the next 24 hours, and he's out there Sunday night to at least help that Lions pass rush. But you would think Houston maybe has a little bit better time protecting C.J. Stroud on Sunday night.
I kept waiting for the trade that was proposed on ESPN by, Tannenbaum for Myles Garrett.
Oh, Jesus
where it was
Christ.
Jahmyr Gibbs, 37 first-round picks, and a variety of other things, including naming rights, I think, to Ford Field or whatever they call it up there in Detroit these days. Almost fell off my seat. It was a deal that I don't think gets approved in Madden in any capacity, one way or another.
I do like Myles Garrett, but if you are all in for a championship run this season, and he's a tough dude, there's some injuries that he's playing through that you wouldn't be 100% certain he's able to go the rest of the way either.
No.
In that equation, right? And so if you're like in win now mode and you're sacrificing some of your future for now, like there's probably not, obviously it's football, it's an attrition sport, anyone can get hurt on any given play, but what he's currently battling and playing through, would you'd be like, there's not a certainty that he is, come week 14, he's out there.
Nope. Those lower body injuries continue to take their physical toll, especially as you're playing week in, week out at anything but 100%. All right, on to the final game of the week, which is a Monday night showdown at Arrowhead with the Chiefs, an overwhelming 9.5 point favorite against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Total on this contest, 45.5, painted across the landscape, kind sir. Kansas City comes in undefeated. Tampa's defense is absolutely reeling. As you begin to dig into some of the defensive numbers for the Bucs, 4 straight games they've allowed 27-plus points. From a counting stats standpoint, 30th in total defense, 29th in yards per play allowed, 19th in run defense, 30th in yards per carry, 30th in total pass defense. None of those are very good for a Tampa team that's just not getting the push up front. But for Kansas City and everything that has gone well for this Chiefs team with some new look parts being integrated into the offensive game plan, Patrick Mahomes not putting up some of the gaudy numbers we've grown accustomed to from his low average depth of target, ADOT for those folks that don't know all of the metrics. His 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions this season, becoming the 4th quarterback since 1970 to start 7-0 with more interceptions than passing touchdowns. The Chiefs defense has been the common denominator, and unfortunately for the Bucs, they just don't have a whole lot of difference makers without Chris Godwin, without Mike Evans. Payne, when you handicap the game on the schedule for tonight, is there a particular matchup or two that stand out to you that you think will determine both the cover and potentially where this total goes as we get towards the finish?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Open 45.5 on the total, and got as high as 46. We're back down to basically 45.5, 45. I was potentially trying to look at the under. It just makes me a little nervous with some of the things that have gone on defensively for Tampa. What I will say is, both sides of the ball has some appealing things to discuss. I think if you're looking at Tampa, right, Liam Cohen and Baker Mayfield do have their work cut out for them tonight, and this is actually, I'm shocked to say, this is a 3rd straight week we've broken down the Buccaneers offense, but once Evans and Godwin went down, I think we discussed some of the changes that Cohen would have to make ahead of the Atlanta game, and sure enough, they came to fruition, right? There was heavier sets. Baker was targeting tight ends and running backs more. Only a 1-game sample size, but Cade Otton led the way with 10 targets last week. Bucky Irving, Rashad White combined for 13 targets, and so, when you think about some of the games where the Chiefs' defense has been a touch more vulnerable, the Bengals really used heavy sets and got their tight ends involved. Ravens come back week 1, really got their tight ends involved from heavier sets. The Chiefs' deficiency on defense has been defending heavier set passes. Now, the Chiefs' defense has been elite against heavy personnel runs this season, and if the game state allows it, Tampa's going to try to run the ball, right? They actually did a decent job against a Ravens defense that came into that game extremely stout against the run, but the Chiefs to date have only allowed 27% of running back runs to be successful. Number 1 in the NFL. Only allow 3 yards per rush in running back runs. Also number 1 in the NFL. But maybe Tampa can find some mild success on the ground. You need Baker Mayfield to protect the football. He's starting to turn it over a bunch. 7 turnover-worthy plays the last 2 games, 9 over the last 3. Only had 5 the first 5 weeks. So I would say if the game state is somewhat neutral, you have to run it with Bucky because he's been a great creator. Number 2 in the NFL in yards after contact when hit at or behind the line of scrimmage. So he doesn't necessarily need the gaping holes to find some efficiency. But you have to throw to your tight ends from heavy personnel. Baker has to protect the football. That's really the formula. Now, the edges are razor thin because the pass-catching group is bottom of the barrel like most offenses would be if they lost their top 2 receivers, Todd, and even some of those ancillary components are battling some injuries with Shepard and McMillan as well. We can talk about the Chiefs' offense, too, if you want.
Yeah, if you want to hit on the Chiefs' offense and what you think it'll look like with a little bit more time for DeAndre Hopkins to integrate into the fold, and how they may go about attacking a Bucs defense that hasn't stopped the run and hasn't stopped the pass. So pick your poison.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to a little bit of the pressure. Can the Buccaneers get some? And, when you're facing the Chiefs' offense in its current construction, you have to take advantage of the left tackle situation. Wanye Morris has allowed a 6.7% pressure rate on pass block snaps. He's allowed 3 sacks. He's had 6 penalties. Kingsley, 8.8% pressure rate, although the vast majority of his sample size was against Trey Hendrickson. So I wonder what that left tackle situation is going to look like moving forward. I don't necessarily think this is the final look, let's call it. If
wink, wink, nod,
nod. There's some guys out there that they are certainly looking at. Either way, I mean the Buccaneers have to dominate whoever is lined up at left tackle, and the problem is Tampa hasn't gotten a ton of pressure this season. 22nd pass rush win rate, 20th in actual pressure rate, and we know Todd Bowles loves to blitz, currently the 5th highest rate in the NFL. The problem is the blitzes aren't getting home this season for Tampa. Maybe that changes some tonight. It needs to, but Tampa's just an average pressure team when they send heat, 16th, and when they send pressure and don't get home, it's a bottom 5 pass defense. The Buccaneers secondary is banged up. Jamal Dean is on IR. On Friday, Antoine Winfield Jr. suffered a foot injury. Saturday, he was a DNP. He's going to try to play through that. We know Bryce Hall is out for the season. So basically what's happened, for as good as Zion McCollum has been, he's only seen 2 targets the last 2 games since Jamal Dean's been down. Teams are attacking the other side of the field, which makes sense with Dean down and some of the backups like Bryce Hall. Josh Hayes, has missed significant time. Did return last week, only played 22 defensive snaps, looked solid, graded out extremely well. I would think maybe his snap count ticks up a touch. The Buccaneers' run defense is tough to gauge, to your point, because if you look at yards per carry surrendered to running backs, it's a bottom 5 group. But if you look at overall efficiency that adjusts for schedule, it's a top 10 group, right? I mean, you face Saquon Barkley and Bijan and Gibbs and Henry, and so it gets skewed a little bit. The schedule of running backs have certainly been difficult. Kareem Hunt has certainly provided a nice gap until Pacheco comes back, but he's been an accumulator, right? He's not overly
and he's
efficient.
starting to show a little bit of that wear and tear as well. He looked fresh as a daisy coming out with no camp, and the last couple weeks hasn't exactly provided that burst.
Yeah, I would expect the accumulation to be there. I do wonder if Vita Vea gets somewhat neutralized going against the strength of that Chiefs offensive line, which is that trio inside of Creed and Tooney and Trey. Kalijah Cansey, he just continues to get mauled and wiped out in the run game. And so at this stage, he's best as a situational pass rusher in my mind, but he's forced to play more snaps based upon trying to get him reps and where he was drafted. And Greg Gaines is out up front for Tampa as well. They like to move him inside at times. Through the air, I would envision, to your question at the top, DeAndre Hopkins' menu is a little bit expanded tonight. Only ran 14 routes during the trade week to KC. Xavier Worthy has been incorporated more post-bye week. Travis Kelce, we've seen his volume skyrocket when Rashee Rice went down 30% target share from the moment Rice suffered his knee injury against the Chargers. The Buccaneers have not been able to stop the tight end, 3rd worst in yards per target allowed to tight ends, bottom 5 in both catch rate and touchdown rate allowed to the tight end position as well. So I think the Chiefs are going to be able to do what they do on offense, and it's basically paper cut you to death right now is the formula.
Rough spot for the Bucs. Now, the silver lining for this team, after this week and next, they go to a bye and the schedule much more favorable down the stretch. But rest assured, Payne, after tonight, we probably won't be talking about the Bucs offense all that much because out of the bye, it's at the Giants, at the Panthers, home against the Raiders. And we're going to need a couple of losses there for that win total. Hopefully we get one tonight and we get one next week against a rested 49ers team that should have some weapons back in the fold, sending Tampa to the bye week 11 with a 4-6 record. But our breakdown, not complete. for Monday Night Football between the Chiefs and Bucs. We bring in our in-house prop specialist to give you an actionable element around Baker Mayfield's performance tonight.
Good morning, Bet the Board listeners. We are back here for our Week 9 Monday Night Football prop. We're going to go with Baker Mayfield under 35.5 yards on his long completion. This is going to be good to 34.5. I would not play any lower than that. Let's dig into this one. So going into Week 9, Baker was 33 of 34 qualifying quarterbacks in air yards at only 6.2 this season. You got to remember, 7 of those weeks he's been playing with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. He is 29th in EPA per pass on deep balls and 29th on time to throw those deep balls. Baker likes to get the ball out of his hands quick. And now we have some issues with injuries. Jalen McMillan, his hamstring popped up on the injury report on Saturday. It had not been on the injury report until then, which means he might have re-aggravated it Friday. Looks like he's going to play, but he might be a little bit limited. Same with Sterling Shepard. Hamstring, again. He's been dealing with that throughout most of the week. So those two players and the injuries to them is not ideal for stretching a defense, unfortunately. Mike Evans knows that, having a bad hamstring and trying to get down the field deep, extending those legs. So Jalen McMillan and Sterling Shepard both being questionable. They're both likely to play, but hamstring injuries causes pause when you look at going over this number. When you look at Kansas City, they're 5th in opponents' time to throw on deep balls this year, 20 yards or more, and 3rd in average target separation defense. So they are not letting guys get open down the field. And when you think about the Chiefs, this is really a step down in competition for Kansas City, who's faced Lamar, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Brock Purdy, Kirk Cousins, even Derek Carr with the speedsters he had in that game. And now you're going up a Baker Mayfield who the offense is kind of played in a box, especially without Godwin and Evans. I mean, what are you going to get from this Tampa Bay deep threat? A lone concern would be the game script is obviously going to suggest Tampa Bay is going to be down late in this game and potentially needing to throw the ball. But I'm just not sure where the deep ball success comes from here. So we're going to go with Baker Mayfield under 35.5 yards on his long completion. You can play that to minus 120, and you can play this down to 34.5. Do not play 33.5 if it gets there. Thank you, guys. Good luck.
Baker, the touchdown maker, Payne. We just need no long completions in that arsenal tonight against Spags' defensive unit.
I think matchup-wise it makes a world of sense, but I think to Billy's point there, maybe the game state isn't going to be perfect, but at 35.5, I like that as well. I think really you've got me a little nervous now that I'm looking at this schedule. Holy shit, they play nobody.
Yeah, well, look, we may have some options. Get a loss today, get a loss next week, get a nice adjusted win total, and it may be something that we have a more comprehensive discussion about as a collective, given the schedule that they have in front of them. The Chargers game,
hopefully
potentially
Cowboys
only the
will help
landmine,
there.
the Cowboys game on the road, you never know. But I can tell you,
Yeah,
that Cowboys-Bucks
hopefully
game, Sunday, December 22nd, probably going to get flexed out of primetime if the Cowboys have 5 wins at that point in the season.
That's true. Hopefully that game ends in a tie.
Oh, that would be tremendous. Although mathematically, we might be in a good spot already with the Cowboys, so we just might need them to win.
It's very true. All right, Monday. We're over an hour. Let's wrap this up.
We got it. Best of luck. Again, well, first off, thanks to all of you, our loyal listeners. Appreciate the continued downloads, the feedback, the comments, and everything else that comes along with it. Best of luck with all of your Monday Night Football investments between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And most importantly, with a Baker Mayfield longest completion ticket in that portfolio, we'll see you at the Winder.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.